So last time we looked at the first sentence of 2 Kings 5:1, and we looked at the features of all the items um, and checked out that they seem to be okay. And today I'm going to continue looking at the rest of this verse. Um, I think maybe one idea that we could do is, since we saved and it didn't say there were any errors, might be interesting to just see how it does if we generate right now. So let's do that. And then I'll start looking at the features because sometimes even if it generates correctly, there may be features that are not set in the best way. And I'm going to go through it more quickly than I did last time. Last time I clicked the features button and um, clicked on the various items. But today, if I can see it just by hovering the mouse, what I want, then I'll do that. So let's see what it says. And the generated version says, it marks it as a title. God causes Naaman to become healthy. That's good. We like to have titles in the present tense. Naaman was the leader of the army of the king of Aram. Naaman won many battles because Yahweh helped him. So the master Naaman, so there's something a little bit wrong there, but that may be a generator issue. We might not be able to fix that. So the master Naaman thought that he was a very great man, and Aram's people respected Naaman greatly. Naaman was a very brave soldier, but Naaman had a very bad skin disease. So this is actually amazing. It doesn't always work this well, as we hopefully will see in some later verses, but this did really great. Um, and actually, we may be able to fix that problem with Naaman's master. But before we do that, let's start checking the features. Okay, so in the second sentence, it's an independent declarative clause. Independent means it's a main clause, not a subordinate clause. And declarative means that it's stating some fact. It's not a command or something like that. So Naaman is the agent. We wanted up here in the our phase 1, it says Naaman was the leader of the army of the king of Aram. So Naaman is the agent, that's right. B, social role. Okay, like John is a doctor. I think that's good. Let's see what the other possibilities are. Class membership is like John is a human. Okay, I think that's good. Social role. So it got that right. So somehow it recognized that to be a leader was a social role. Okay, this, if you look at B and you put it up on the top word part of that, B, it says it has an obligatory agent and an obligatory state, an optional beneficiary. So what this means is that when it says Naaman is something, that something argument has to be a state. And you can see that if you hover the mouse over the noun phrase after the verb to be, it says semantic role state. Okay, so state, patient means something acted upon, and state is something we associate with being. And you can also see that it's a state from the second letter is an S. Okay, so leader. Okay, now the leader of region of authority, the army. That looks good. So region of authority marks the region that someone governs. Of the army of the king of Aram. So the king, its region of authority of Aram. All these nested noun phrases are no specific semantic role because it's only the leader here that's the state for the verb to be. So these, it says semantic role not applicable, semantic role not applicable. So the king, he's the king with the region of authority Aram. It's the army of the king. So this is the generic genitive, that's correct. So it's a loose association, the army of the king. So all this looks very good. There's one very minor thing that I would change, and as I mentioned to the group in Colorado, most of our semantic representations probably didn't bother with this. But when you introduce a new concept like leader here, rather than routine, which means it's been discussed earlier, frame inferable would be better in this case. For a new concept, usually you want first mention, generic, or frame inferable. So frame inferable because it's the leader of the army of the king of Aram. So we know which leader this is because of all this extra information, that he's the leader of the army of the king of Aram. So I'm going to say that's frame inferable, and it's the army of the king of Aram, so I'm going to make that frame inferable so we know what army it is. And it's the king of Aram, so we know who that is, so I'm going to make that frame inferable. Of Aram. Should that be frame inferable? Well, I don't think it matters since it's a place. Maybe. Okay, so that sentence looks good. Now, I'm going to save for a moment and note that it said Naaman was the leader of the army of the king of Aram. Okay, we're okay so far. Okay, so now let's go to the third sentence. Again, it's independent declarative. It's a main clause, so it's independent. It's making a statement. It's not a command, so it's declarative. Okay, Naaman. Okay, that's good. When, it's going to be one because it's discourse. So our normal tense for telling a story is discourse. And you might wonder, why didn't we just say past tense? And that's because some languages might use the present tense for telling a story. So this is discourse, and that's right. So he won, and now if I hover the mouse over the win, the verb, it tells us the arguments. There's an obligatory agent and an obligatory patient. Jacob win battle. Jacob won the battle. Okay, so this is correct then, that it should be a patient argument of battle. And then we have an argument much/many. The distinction is that there are two kinds of common nouns. We can either have a countable noun, like battle, you say battles, or we can have a mass noun, like sand. So it would be much for sand or many for battles. That's why it says much-many. Okay, battle. Now if we hover the mouse over the second line and you look down at the features, you see that the number is plural and the participant tracking is generic. So it's not talking about specific battles, but he won many battles in general. So that's generic for the participant tracking. Okay, then there's an event clause. So If we look up the up here at the phase 1, it said, because Yahweh helped Naaman, Naaman won many battles. So we have because event. Okay, there are two senses of because, and one is for noun phrases, and this is for an event. This is correct because it's in an event. If you hover over the initial part of the clause for the subordinate clause, it says, as the type, the first feature there, event modifier. So this is a subordinate clause that's modifying the event of the main clause, which is winning battles. So because Yahweh helped Naaman, he won battles. So this should be an event modifier subordinate clause. It says the topic noun phrase is it's declarative, it's stating something that happened, and it's the topic noun phrase is most agent-like. That means we're not trying to put this in the passive. Yahweh helps Naaman. We're not saying Naaman was helped by Yahweh, which would be passive. Then we'd use most patient-like, which would be focusing on Naaman. Okay, so because Yahweh help, let me scroll down a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, to help someone generically. Mary helped John. So even though that shows through many difficult problems, if you look at the arguments, it just has patient. So this Naaman is the patient, the one that Yahweh helped. And if I put the mouse over the second line under help, it shows this is discourse. That's probably okay. I'm a little bit, I forget whether it should be discourse or present, but I think the analyzer got it right here. Okay, because Yahweh helped Naaman. Okay, Naaman is singular, routine, he's been mentioned before. So that looks good. Okay, so the third sentence again is independent and declarative. So this is stating what happened because Naaman won many battles. So as I mentioned in discussing the phase 2, I decided to use so, the conjunction, so that the two following sentences. So his master thought highly of him, and the people of Aram also thought highly of him. So I start out with the so, and then in the second sentence I use the conjunction and. So that ties together these two sentences. Okay, so independent declarative. So the master, this one got it right. Frame inferable. The master of Naaman. So one thing here is I decided to write it literally since our system could do that. Another option here would be to say, well, we know the master is the king, so we could have just said, so the king thought so and so. That would be another option here, but I decided to go with the more literal representation. So Naaman's master. So here, there might be another, let's see, it shows examples. John's boss. That seems pretty similar to our case. So I think the the genitive that we associate with the English word of is appropriate here. So Naaman's master think that some event occurs. Okay, that's appropriate because he thinks, and then subordinate clause, that Naaman was a very great man. So this should go with an event. That's the right form of think, and if we look at the theta grid, which shows the argument structure for think, we see there's an obligatory patient and an obligatory patient proposition, and that's it. That's all we need, and that's what we have. We have the agent back here, master, and then here in the clause, if we put the mouse over the beginning of that clause boundary, it says the type is patient, an object complement. So this is a complement to the verb think. It completes the meaning of that verb to think. It's declarative, saying something that Naaman was class membership, a great man. The example of class membership is John is a human. Okay, this is something that Todd could answer better. I'm not sure whether it should be class membership. I think I'll leave it that way, or if it should be like social role, indicating because it's emphasizing the fact that he's great. Another option would be to use the predicative form of to be and use an adjective phrase here, was great. But I will go ahead with the way the analyzer did it for now. Okay, so associated with our English word a, first mention, this is the first time we mentioned a man, although in context we know who that man is, but so I'm not sure of that either, but let's leave it that way. Okay, now note that the generator said Naaman was the leader of the army of the king of Iran. He won many battles. So the master of Naaman, so the master Naaman thought that he was a very great man. So actually we can fix that. So I'm going to go to generator. That's the second menu item in the menus up at the top left. Lexicon and grammar development. Oh my goodness, there's something there. I don't know why that error popped up. Okay, so you notice it says generate up here, this button next to the verse reference, generate -1. That means that there's one problem in this. And if I scroll down, look, it says master generic genitive Naaman. So what it's doing is it doesn't know how to express this generic genitive. So what I can do is I can double click on that. This isn't vitally important, by the way, what I'm doing now. This could be fixed up later. What's most important is getting the semantic representation correct. And for the analyzer especially, the analyzer will get corrected later when we correct the English. But here, it's showing words that are paired with Naaman, and you can think these things of Naaman. So Saxon genitive is the form of the genitive that has apostrophe S. So this would come out Naaman's land, Naaman's friends, Naaman's country. Generally with a name, a person, we use the Saxon genitive. So you could think, do you want it to be Naaman's soldiers or the soldiers of Naaman? Well, I'm just going to copy Saxon genitive. Now there's a way to do that. You can click on this white space in between soldiers and Naaman. Then you can do the pull down menu, Saxon genitive. By the way, there are some other options. Bare stem pre-nominal modifier. So what that would mean, say I have tomb of stone. That's a bad example because it's, I think it should be made of stone. But if it were, you could say, I want stone to occur before the noun. So it could be stone tomb, say. But anyway, the ones that we use most often are Saxon and Norman. Norman uses the English word of in English. So then I can set that. then if they're all the same kind like this, all sex and genitive, I can go to this button at the bottom left, copy first relationship to all, and it will fix that. It'll just make all of them sex and genitive. Now I'm going to close. Okay, we got to figure out where we're getting that message. Okay, so now I'm going to, I could generate here. Well, I'll just do that to show you that we can do it. So in this screen, the lexicon and grammar development screen, you can also generate in that screen. I usually use the generate button in the proposition analysis screen. This screen, you can do some complicated things involving the generator, and you can see how it makes substitutions for rules. You can look at the rules over on the right part of the screen. I showed that briefly in another tutorial. Okay, so now if you look at this, God causes Naaman to become healthy. Naaman was the leader of the army of the king of Aram. Naaman won many battles because Yahweh helped him. So Naaman apostrophe S master thought that he was a very great man. So you see it fixed that problem. Before it said Naaman master, it did. That's because it didn't know how to do that genitive relationship. Up here I can say save verse, so I'm going to do that. Okay, then I'm going to go back to the analyzer. Okay, so I go to Utilities menu, Proposition Analysis, and I'm just going to keep scanning through this verse. Okay, so it had, so the master of Naaman thought that Naaman was a great man. Then here, this second sentence, again, it begins with this conjunction and the people of Aram. Now, this this relationship, kinship, is not right, so we should fix that. Also, it says the people of Aram, so again, this is a very minor correction, not that important, but I would usually make that frame inferable, since from the context, it's the people of Aram, you know that it's the particular people that it is. And eventually, hopefully, we'll improve. We may be able to improve the analyzer so it can figure out these things automatically. Right now, as I mentioned in another tutorial, most of our emphasis has been on the generation, since we're interested in making our program friendly for people who are using this to generate translations into other languages. Okay, so that people are the agent of the people are respecting, so they're the agent. But this kinship is wrong, so I'm going to click on. There aren't going to be more senses of kinship, so I got to click on replace word. So down in the bottom right, there are all these buttons, and one of them is replace word. I click on kinship. Kinship would be for like. John is Mary's father or something like that. If you look down here in this pull down, the 8th word here in the relation, this is relationships. So if you go down, you can see about, because, etc. But the first ones are these ones that aren't expressed with words necessarily, although maybe with the English word of commonly. And it says kinship A marks blood relationship, like brother, mother, and legal relationships. So I don't think this really falls into that category. I think what we want here is realm of authority. Oh, people, king of the Israelites. No, it's a little bit different. It's not realm of authority because this is king of the Israelites. So the Israelites are the people that the king has authority over. This is the opposite relation. We're saying the people of Aram. So you might consider nationality. I think that might be the appropriate one. I considered the generic genitive, but let's do nationality. Okay. And whether the generation comes out right or not, that's probably the right one because they're in the nation of Aram. Okay, respect, that should be discourse, and if we hover the mouse over the second line, we see discourse, respected. And then if we put it over the first line of respect, it says it has an obligatory agent, obligatory patient. So the people respected, Naaman is the patient. That's the one who's getting acted on here. That is a patient-like noun phrase, as you see if you hover over the features at that noun phrase. And again, you can see that if you get more experienced with the software, that it's the second letter. The first one, S, after the NP, says it's not in a sequence. The P is for patient-like. So Naaman. Okay, so people respected Naaman. And then there's an adverbial phrase. It's important that it's adverbial, greatly. Okay, and another possibility would be to put much, and I think Todd prefers that. We may end up converting greatly everywhere to much, but for now I'll leave it that way. Okay, so the next phrase, again, is independent declarative. Let's look at the verb first. It's to be equative. I think that's wrong here. So Naaman was a brave soldier. So equative is like John the man who was here. I think this is better as a social role because it's talking about the kind of soldier. It's not saying he's a specific soldier. Like if it said Naaman was that soldier, or Naaman was the soldier that I knew, then it's talking about a specific soldier. Then an equative would be correct. Equative is like is, this is that. I think, and Todd may correct me, but I think it's better to put social role here. Okay, so Naaman, now the arguments that social role wants, if we put over to be, we see as obligatory agent and obligatory state. Okay, and we've got that. The hovering over the noun phrase features for Naaman, it says most agent-like. Hovering over the noun phrase features for soldier, it's state. Soldier is first mention. That's appropriate here. We haven't been talking about a brave soldier. So I think this is right. Naaman was, and to be should be discourse. And you see that if you hover over the second line under B, social role, it says time equals discourse. It's affirmative if you look down at other features. Saying he is, it's not saying he wasn't. And finally we come to the last sentence. Again, it's independent declarative. Now we have but. So but states a contrast. It's a conjunction. Look, we have a form of have for disease, and the analyzer knew that. That's amazing that it got that right. Okay, so have, it says, has an obligatory patient and an obligatory state. It's obviously the right sense of have, having a disease, so we don't have to change that. Naaman is the agent, as we can see here, and disease is a state, so that's correct. Have is discourse. Okay, I'm going to leave it that way. Had first mention for disease, a disease, and it's a bad disease. There's an adjective phrase modifying disease. Note that the adjective phrase should be attributive. That's something that we modifies, comes with a noun, like a bad disease, a good disease, if there could be one. And the predicative adjective use would be where we say the disease was bad. So it goes with a verb, like to be. Okay, was a bad disease of the skin. Okay, and I think that's appropriate, this generic general relationship. The noun phrase for skin is semantic role not applicable as it should be. It's not the argument of a verb. And skin here, I'm going to change that to frame inferable because we know that it just means skin. Okay, so let's do generate now. Now it's possible that something won't come out as nicely as it did before because it was looking good before. But sometimes we have to make the semantic representations the best way, regardless. It's working and working and working. You see the hourglass? Down at the bottom left, you can see it's going through all these rules. Okay, so here, we finally got it. Title, God causes Naaman to become healthy. Now, in our English grammar, there's a rule, if we have the word heal, that will convert that into God heals Naaman. So this might come out in that more complex way. Okay, Naaman was the leader of the army of the king of Aram. Naaman won many battles because Yahweh helped him. So Naaman's master thought that he was a very great man, and the Aram people respected Naaman greatly. Naaman was a very brave soldier, but Naaman had a very bad skin disease. So everything's good, except, you might wonder about the Aram people. And I think that that I did it right. I'll ask Todd about that. This is just the way it comes out. So I would leave the semantic representation the way it is for now, even though the English translation came out better with the generic genitive. Okay, so that's a description of how we check the rest of this verse, and I'll probably go on to verse 2 in chapter 5 next time. Thank you for listening.